Hello students, welcome to my channel. Today the second part of this is chapter 4, chapter 5 we were talking, and then in the chapter title it says speaking about the crafts and industries. So in this chapter usually we have been already discussed about the different crafts and artisans of India, and how this Indian merchants and crafts and artisans in fact actually started moving from one their what called profession to the other, and then how this India in fact was actually the importer of the goods, but now they are actually becoming the exporter of the goods and all. So that is how actually have happened when the colonial rule actually was established in India. Now you will be able to understand about the industries, especially in the pre-British era, and most of the our merchants in fact were very much actually famous in the Europe countries, Middle East, and also in China. So today in this chapter we will not talk about the crafts and industries in fact, but we will talk about the second part of this, how the Indian industries in fact actually flourished during the colonial rule, especially when the World War has occurred. So today we will be talking about also the industrial growth in the 20th century, especially we will have also the textiles. There is a case study actually is given in this chapter, so we will talk about that. So you have already familiar with the industrial revolution that has been taken place in Britain, and how this industrial revolution in fact actually ruined the backbone of the peasants and agriculture and merchants and different business classes people. And also we have seen that most of the cottage industry in fact we had in India were actually banned with due to the presence of the what called the Britishers. So therefore you have already heard in my previous video. So today we will talk about this also some part of the machine based industries. Now we have seen that most of the cotton mill or textile mill in fact actually established in Bombay, and nearly like more than 84 mills in fact actually at that time, especially 1854 was actually built. And most of the time we have seen that from the rural setup many people were flocking towards it, and then they were searching for the job, and then trying to survive themselves, because the situation was such that people did not have their own land, and they have to go to the city and town for the searching for the job. And you have also seen in my previous video that there are many of the areas in fact the Britishers actually put the taxation system, and then this three taxation system in fact actually destroy the backbone of the our Indian peasants, farmers, merchants, and also the business classes people. So the three the taxation system, especially like a permanent settlement or jamindari system or a mahalwari system or raituri system, these three systems in fact actually created a kind of like a deprivation of their land, property, cattle, the family, and their cultures, their rituals, every bit of areas actually affected very much. So in this machine-based industries, when we see that in India, most of the areas, in fact, especially we have seen that the Persian or the Gujarati or Marwari, this business classes people in fact has taken the big role. They played the big role, and then they established the textile mill and all, and then their what called work activity is still was going on. So now once this Europeans stopped them for banning the this chint, the cloth which was actually very famous in Europe country, and of course it has got the big demand at that time, was actually stopped totally and a ban. So therefore the Indian merchants in fact they didn't have the other like a scope to sell. So therefore in 1862 most of these merchants in fact they established, especially they took the another initiative to not to have the much contact with the Europeans since the British colonial rule have been banned. So they have actually kept a contact with the other part of the world, especially China, Malaysia, or maybe the Thailand or Sri Lanka. Such kind of countries were actually had the contact with this country, India, and then they started distributing, they started supplying the goods what was actually produced, especially the textiles. And apart from that, you can see that there are many of the jewelry or maybe the precious stones or dye which was actually used for the cloth coloring and all. So here we have seen that India started growing in such conditions. Now also when the World War has been taken place, especially in the 1914, and it lasted of course from 1918 onwards. So you can see that how this World War in fact actually made the our Indian merchants to come up during this time, in spite of the colonial rule actually imposed, okay, and in spite of banning the goods supplied. So in India at that time we have seen that this wood steel was actually produced in different parts of South India, and this East India Company actually surgeon and a surveyor Francis Buchanan has written in detail about the woods producing furnaces of South India. And you can see that iron was actually mixed with charcoal and kept inside small clay pots. Temperatures were actually moderated to produce the desired steel for the making of the sword. So that's why this particular the method was applied to make the better steel production. And we have the sword called Tipu Sultan one, which was actually a great demand. And in the auction perhaps in Britain, perhaps this sword was, and a high price was actually kept for having the bargaining. So you can see that here the iron and steel industry in fact actually played the major role in this time period. And remarkably, the progress that has been taken place, and this iron and steel in fact was very unfortunately not in the hand of the Britishers. And it was very much like a lucky that at that time you can see that the excellent quality of the sword of Tipu Sultan actually bears the testimony about this iron and steel industry of India. So you can see that hard and sharp edge of the sword could tear apart metal armors. That is the quality, actually very much a different quality. And a high carbon steel called wood actually produced in South India, that is we have already discussed, was used for making this sword. Now let us see the decline in iron smelting in different parts of our India due to the ban of the people by the colonial rule. So here iron smelting in India was actually very common till the end of the 19th century. Here we can see that most of the people were in the village, rural area, even people were using the iron smelting and all. And then most of the districts in Bihar and central India had also smelters who used local deposits of iron ores to produce utensils and also tools for daily use. So here implementation of the colonial forest laws drastically actually affected the business of iron smelting, and the iron actually smelters could not collect wood from the forest, which they used as a charcoal to start their furnaces. So they could not extract ores after the implementation of the forest laws. So we have seen that the Britishers in fact for their personal benefit, they have got no law for themselves, but for the law for the Indians in fact they made the many laws through which these Britishers can utilize maximum of the our natural and this goods from our India, and then they kept many laws for our Indians not to use that. it means by being an Indian is a kind of like a slave, that you can't have the right to use your own country's natural resources. But the Britishers, actually being a foreigner, they are actually using the all the goods. And our Indians were actually really became the very much miserable condition because of the this dominant behavior in everywhere. So here the iron smelters actually couldn't collect the wood. Why? Because they need the wood to make the charcoal, and without charcoal they can't melt the this iron ore and all. So therefore, for them, when it was given a kind of like a ban, so their life, their what called like a source of income actually stopped, and these people started becoming like laborers. They had their own this iron smelters, a kind of like a small cottage industry, but then now they have to become a kind of like a laborer under someone else. So here in some areas, the iron smelters actually were permitted to collect wood and extract iron ores, but the heavy duty on the furnace discouraged them. Heavy duty in the sense that they were charged heavily by the whatever they were collecting from the forestry. So when you are unable to pay, then you can't collect it. So that's why the heavy charge actually made their life miserable. Now, here, by the middle of the 19th century, what happened? Especially, the colonial government started importing iron and steel from Britain. So in Britain, also they were making the this iron ore, and then here you can see that most of the this iron ore was actually brought from England, was not that much actually fine and a good one. Quality is compared to India was not that much good one. So that is why this Britain iron and steel was not that much famous. In fact, so people were actually knowing that the good quality and the fine quality of the iron and steel is found in India, and it was very famous, world famous in fact. So therefore, you can see that here what is happening, that now iron smiths used to imported iron to produce materials for daily use. By the beginning of the 20th century, what happened? Ironsmiths faced a new challenge in the form of a competition which came from the iron and steel industries established in India. Now, let us know about the Tata iron and steel industry, how actually has taken place. Here, we have got luckily this Persian business person, especially Jamshid, Tata Jamshid, or here we have got the person. No, he has taken the lead. See, the Tata Iron and Steel Company was actually set up in 1907 in India. That is during the colonial rule, in fact. So on the banks of the Sabarnarekha River, at a place called Sakchi. So you must remember Sakchi. So later named at Jamshedpur. After they renamed it Jamshedpur, and this factory started production in the year 1912. It means the factory started laying the foundation in the year of 1907, and 1212, in fact 5 years of this time has taken for the construction of the building and then houses, in fact, and then into 1912, in fact, this work activity started. And during the World War, especially during the First World War, Tata Iron and Steel Company, actually TISCO, the name is given, short form, TISCO, received a demand from the British government to help with the development of the Indian railways and to produce war materials. Now you have to realize that how this Britishers, in fact, banned the Indian this iron and steel industry to stop, but then now they required from India. And then during this time, especially 1914, the World War, a lot of iron and steel, in fact, started producing, and then more and more you can see that bridges and different war materials started making out of this iron steel. So the British government, in fact, was also demanded that since you have got a very good quality iron and all, so you can also help in laying the railway track. And during this time, Tata iron steel industry, in fact, actually played the big role in laying the railway track in India. So they did. The Britishers started. British initiated, but then they couldn't complete due to the World War. But then the Tata Iron Steel Company, in fact, actually made these things happen and made these things to possibly. Okay, so therefore railways and other areas, actually this company, in fact, played the big major role. And by 1919, the end of this World War 1919, especially here what happened, up to the 90% of the total steel actually produced by Tisco, that is the Tata no Tata this company, in fact, actually produced nearly 90% of the Tata, and means the supply of the other country was more or less actually not much seen. So here gradually the industrial class in India became very much prominent, and eventually they played a very important role in the freedom struggle, in fact. So that is one of the major advantage and merits that we can see. So next we have got one case study on textile. You can see that a textile, in fact, also played a major role at this time. Now Indian weavers were known for their skills. India, every time they are actually making the things manually, and they didn't have the machinery, in fact, right from the beginning. But the moment Britishers came, the machinery things started happening, and yet the handmade, the manual work had not stopped. So here you can see the design and tricks and many other things which was not found in a British in the Britain industries and all. So here they used a spinning wheel and a loom to weave cloth, and weavers lived in a close knit communities, and there were villages where a large number of weavers would reside. So these villages were actually regularly visited by merchants, and who would buy their final product, and natural products like indigo, madder, and turmeric were actually used to dye cloth. So prior to the British rule, the weavers contributed immensely to the pre-colonial economy. Indian weavers were actually highly skilled and specialized in their crafts. So they actually provided steep competition to the European manufacturers. However, the industrial revolution actually proved to be fruitful only for the British, while the Indian textile industry suffered a great loss. So since they stop it, so therefore you can see that our Indian craftsmanship actually destroyed. So once the British established themselves as a colonial power in India, they monopolized the Indian market, simultaneously weeding out of the other trading companies such as the French and Portuguese. So once the British actually established themselves as a colonial power in India, they monopolized the Indian market. Okay, so that is we have seen. So the British rules and regulations actually very often destroyed the Indian textile industry, and weavers were actually major victims of the decline of the textile industry. However, the handloom industry in India was actually not completely ruined. Yes, the intricate designs and patterns which were made on the clothes could not be produced in the British factories. For the poor people, the British factories could not produce the coarse cloth. Solapur in western India and Madurai in South India emerges the new centers of handloom industry. Okay, so this is going on internally, and most of the Indian weavers actually and craftsmen were forced to abandon their means of livelihood and go back to agriculture to work as agricultural laborers. So that is what I was mentioning in the beginning. So therefore, the increased pressure on land further contributed to the poverty of the country, and some weavers and craftsmen went worked in the plantation of Africa, South America, and even in India, in many parts of our states, we have seen. So many flourishing Indian cities, which actually were once centers of textile production, declined, and this process is actually known as the deurbanization. So this is we will be talking about. All right. So I would like to suggest you to read through this chapter very nicely. Very simple chapters. Okay. So thank you.